Good evening, family. You've tuned in again to another version of The Journey. Like we say, the journey is from you to me and from me to you. I'm Dr. John Robertson, and I'll be one of your hosts this evening. And just want to let my other host in here for a bit, who likes to say he's there to listen, but he's the most active listener and questioner I can think of, and I appreciate him. Charles?
Well, that's part of, you would say, some lessons that I've learned in life is that it's kind of a good thing to be quiet, sit back and soak in what's going on in the room, and you might learn something. So because of, once again, the wisdom that's in the room and the topic that's going on today, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit back, and we're blessed, and we have some great spirits in the room.
Absolutely.
So I know I'm going to soak it in, and I'm going to learn something, and I'm going to share it. So, and as you know, I said that I was going to have some pictures at the end. Well, evidently I didn't tell the truth.
Okay.
But I promise you that we will definitely have some pictures showing some of the highlights of the recovery walk from week before last.
Great,
Okay.
great.
Okay. So won't you enlighten us on what we're talking about today?
Okay. Tonight, just to go back a little bit, in terms of the recovery walk and run, as all of you know by now, September, we have been focusing our topic on substance abuse, as this is National Alcohol and Drug Recovery Month. And as we're coming to a close, we thought that it was apropos to close it out with a topic that is, if not on our minds almost every day, it is on the minds of many of our leaders, our children, etc. And that is what has been called the school to prison pipeline. We have been very concerned for some time, and by we I mean the entire community, not only the African American and Latino communities, but communities of all social stripes have been concerned about so many of our young people going to prison, often for things that they may be just at the edge of their consciousness, and they wonder how they got there and why they got there and how to get out of it. And we call it a pipeline, or it has been called a pipeline, because quite frankly, once you get in, it is very difficult to get out. So tonight we have a very distinguished panel, and I like what Charles said about there being some great spirits here, because before the show, just in chatting with each one of them momentarily, these are all individuals of great wisdom and also great faith. And just to reintroduce a good friend of mine and also someone who was here on our last broadcast, to my left we have Mr. Johnny Robinson, and I pronounce his name very carefully because at times our names are so similar that someone said, well, which one of you is which? And I said, I'm the pretty one. So Johnny, again, welcome to the show, and it's a privilege and honor having you here. Over on the other side, we have another great spirit who you heard last week, and who, after the show, we were still high in the spirit based on her words and her thoughts and her philosophy. And I'm talking about Miss Verna Garman. And Ms. Garman is here with us tonight to share much more of her wisdom. Okay? And again, welcome, Verna.
Thank you.
Okay, and in the middle, last but not least, and this is our, if you want to call it our flag wave to what is coming up in the next month, and that is Hispanic Latino Heritage Month. Also, someone who I would like to call friend, and who we have known each other for several years, and who is a substance abuse counselor and who has been in the criminal justice system on the other side of the doors for almost 30 years, Mr. Norberto Perez. Norberto, welcome.
Thank you for having me here.
Okay. I'd like to start with a question. I talked very briefly about the school to prison pipeline, and I'd like anyone on our panel to just comment on that. What is your understanding of what that is, as far as your experience is concerned?
I can start by saying that my experiences through the many years I've been involved with the criminal justice system, we have a high degree of individuals that they have been dropping out of school at an early time in their lives. And to make matters worse, most of them have learning disabilities. And it's not that they cannot learn, it's that they learn differently, and then they become, as a result of that, kind of outcasts. And once they reach that point when they finally or unfortunately get involved with the criminal justice system, it reaches a point where they feel kind of trapped. And unfortunately, our criminal justice system in some areas has become like a school for these individuals, and places where at some moment they become hopeless and they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, because it's a constant reinforcement of the negative behaviors because of the type of environment that they're involved with. And as clinicians, counselors, and some clergymen, our goal is to start reshaping those minds and to start showing them that there's other side on the outside of those walls that bring them hope, direction, and basically faith. And right now, because of the amount of people that are engaging into the criminal justice system, also the financial situation, unfortunately some aspects of the media, those things are basically gearing them into not the positive direction that we would like to establish. And also we have the external pressures from society and so on. When you put all those components together, it really creates like the perfect storm for those individuals that in some cases are very disadvantaged. When you throw into that the problematic of our society and the families, most of the people that I work with, they come from dysfunctional families. There's a high degree of abuse, physical, mental, emotional abuse. And then you spice that up with some mental health issues that sometimes are not really very well defined, but sometimes they are borderline. And when you create that type of environment and you have all those aspects together, it causes a lot of damage to some people.
And the situation when one makes the choice to start self-medicating at a young age, school age, they learn a behavior that once they offend and get into the criminal justice system, the criminal justice system reinforces dependency. They're in and out of that system because many of the children do not have safe homes, do not have food, and do not have electric lights. And they're back, and the juveniles come back, so they have a place to eat and a safe environment to sleep at night. So the parents have failed many of these children, and the homes are so dysfunctional, teaching the children codependency and dependency behavior, that the criminal justice system becomes a place where they can be sheltered, and at least they know they get 3 meals a day. And they offend and reoffend because they do not know how to survive and stand on their own 2 feet outside of the protection of the criminal justice system. And the drug use has also damaged their cognitive skills. They do not problem solve well. They do not have good coping skills. And many have anger management problems, which gets them into problems with the criminal justice system.
That is very significant, and one factor that you mentioned early on, that they start using drugs at an early age, is when their brains are developing. That is the most crucial part for an individual. When they are learning their social skills, their brains are growing, their bodies are growing, they are learning about society, and with the lack of a positive, strong role models for those individuals, when you mix all that together, you are creating an early dependency, early lack of social functioning.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually they get like they are like in a pit. They keep digging themselves deeper and deeper and deeper. And unfortunately, some people can make it, but one of the issues that I face every day is that if we don't catch these people early on, they reach a point where finally their brains are so hammered by the drugs and the alcohol, and most of all, they have burned all the social bridges that could give them the motivation to get their life back in control, in a good direction. And the end result is that unfortunately I see some of these people that we lose them and we can never regain them back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, when you look at the whole thing, it's a total tragedy. And it's true, the parents have some a good level, big amount of responsibility. But somebody said many years ago, it takes a village to raise a child.
That is correct. Very much.
And our society has evolved in such a way right now that when we were growing up, we were part of a community. And basically we were raised by the neighborhood that we were in. And right now, unfortunately, we have grown at such a fast pace with technology, and we become, it's like it's a paradox, because we live in the age of communication, but sometimes we don't even know our neighbors and we don't talk to them. But we talk to somebody 20, 50, 100, 1,000 miles away via text, phone, or whatever you want to call it. And unfortunately, we were not, or we have not been able to grow socially in a way that we can create a good connection or a good, a very good way of using those media resources in a way that enhances our humanity, instead of isolating ourselves more from the environment and becoming more alienated from ourselves and other people. Because our people that we have in jail, they are basically, they are strangers to themselves. They don't know who they are, and some of them, they don't know what they want.
Exactly.
They're like ships without ruders. And the faith community plays a big role on that process of helping these people to find their way back into the person and use their potential and become the person that they can be.
One of the problems with many young people today, which I did not experience and you didn't experience, we had intergenerational adult supervision. Most of us had not only two-parent families, but we had a grandparent, we had great aunts, we had aunts, and so we had the wisdom. Many of these children today, they lack two parents in the home. They have the latchkey syndrome. Elementary school children are letting themselves in the house with a key, and the single parent is at work. So that child is without adult supervision once they're at home. And that is a syndrome where when children are without adult supervision for a long period of time, and they're raised by television and these games on the internet, they do not respect adults. They do not respect law enforcement, because those are adults. They have self-parented, and they become a law unto themselves. That's a syndrome that we do not address in this country. We have too many children without adult supervision during the times that they're out of school.
And I think that's an excellent point, particularly, Verna, as you were talking about the role of the family in previous generations. And Norberto, you also touched on some of the same things as you talked about the dysfunctions, in families. One of the things that I'd like to comment or to hear some comments on is that the values of many young people seem to have shifted, so that I know my generation and perhaps a generation behind me, going to prison or going to jail was a source of shame. But for some of the younger generation that I come into contact with, that for many of them, it is a rite of passage. As I've heard young people sit and talk about, well, how many times have you been to juvie, or and talk like old pros about the different facilities that they have been, and that is quite worrisome. As I've heard that, and what do you think, or why is it for some of these young people that go into jail or prison is a rite of passage?
Let me speak one to that. I'll just give one point, because I was in prison ministry probably about 25 years. You know, that was the mission that God called me to. And about a year ago, the Lord called me to go into, well, 2.5 years ago, into juvenile ministry. I went in with a church group, and I was a teacher, basically teaching some theology in the Bible. And we had, out of 125 juveniles from 13 to 17, 125, 25 of them came to the Bible study we had, like on Tuesday night. And they were Hispanics, African American, and Caucasians. Majority of them were African Americans. And right off the bat, you know that they could not read. They would just, grab the Bible. We would discuss some things, but they didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have that ability to sit in. And then they lose attention when you're sitting there trying to tell them something, because their mind, and it's sad, and that's how they were. But one thing I saw, which was very bad, see, we talk about that system, but you talking about bullies? I hear that now. We talking about bullies and so forth. There was a couple of guys in there who those other fellas, when they come to the Bible study, they were scared of them guys in there. And that was, to me, I'm like, looking at this is really sad. I mean, these guys were violent in there, and they would let them know. So even in Bible study, it was like scared, or this guy sit there, they sit in the back and just look at them. These guys are vicious. And so they're in a system that is sad. A lot of people don't realize it, but it's a lot of violence goes on in that juvenile. Y'all have just seen this thing that burst out by the basketball game and so forth. They had, but that is every day. And I seen kids. I really was touched, because I tried to teach them the word, and I seen a couple of kids come with bloodshot eyes. Somebody done punched them in the face and scarred. And they intimidated. They really afraid of these guys in there. And I mean, we talking about Bible study, and I'm looking at them like, gosh, this is so toxic, and so they have to put on a certain type of attitude in that. If they become weak and scared of them or whatever, they ain't gonna have. They take everything they got. That's how they abuse them. So that and you can't do nothing about that in there. You got some of the officers say, well, they're gonna take care of this, or we're gonna have a shutdown and take care of this kid who's a bully or whatever. It don't work. They come right back and use violence to control in that environment.
One of the factors that concerns me about the juvenile justice system, and at the early age at which youth are now offending, is that they have not internalized the values of society. They have not developed character. They lack integrity. They lack compassion.
I agree.
They lack mercy. They lack the ability to love themselves and love others. That's the most damaging aspect to the youth today.
I agree.
They're not being loved and nurtured. So they're unable to love and nurture themselves and love and nurture other people. And that's why they're violent one on the other. Because they lack nurturing skills. And if you do not know how to nurture yourself as a human being, you will not know how to nurture others. And the education, once they're in juvenile and in public school, need to be based on character development. Character is who you are. Your profession is what you do. So many of our children don't know who they are.
That's true.
And they lack identity. And they don't find it in their parents or in their community. And they are searching for who am I. And that's why I believe strongly that we need to do more character-based development and education in public schools and certainly in juvenile justice.
And I agree with that point very much, Verna. But I'm concerned because a lot of the push now in our educational system, even as we talk about things like the Common Core, et cetera, emphasizes the mechanics of learning more so than the character building, which I call the critical thinking, being able to think and discern that which is substantial and will allow you to learn those self-nurturing skills versus the external, and that is simply knowing how to add two and two. Now, being able to add two and two is important, but then if you don't know why you're adding two and two, you still can be bamboozled.
I agree.
So it seems like we need to have more of a voice to just the kind of issue that you're talking about, that character building.
Well, I am a true profession person. Spent a lot of time in school.
Okay.
I'm a registered nurse
Okay.
with a bachelor's and a master's, and I'm also an attorney. But in nursing at Tuskegee University, for the bachelor's, the core of nursing and the law is how you think. 3 years in law school is teach you to think like a lawyer. 4 years in nursing school for BS is teach you to think like a nurse. And the nurse with a bachelor, she has to understand the how and the why. I may give you a back rub. I know how to do it. I can teach somebody else how to do it. But do you understand the why? Why are you doing the back rub? And unless a person understands the how and the why of their choices and their decision making, they will take an action because they know how to do the action, but they don't know the why is the consequences. If I do this action, what are the consequences I'm going to encounter? And the average kid in juvenile justice systems, they made a decision to offend, and they gave no thought to the consequences. Many adults are in prison, life sentences. They didn't have coping skills, anger management problems, did not know how to reason through. They took an action, and they're now in prison for life. So they have to understand choices and consequences. And that, again, is rooted in character. Because you have certain values, there are certain things you want to do. And I would compliment Dr. Robinson. It's in this room, there is a warmth and there's a sense of I'm being nurtured and loved here. And there are certain places you go, you know you're not being nurtured, you know you're not being loved, and you better be guarded. But here, I'm disarmed, I'm relaxed. His profession, he has to nurture and love people. So he's brought that into this room, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I have to say, I truly appreciate that compliment, because today was one of those days that ability to nurture was truly tested. So you kind of refilled my tank, of nurturing. But I wanted to come back to Norberto a bit, because you have seen some of the results of individuals who have been in the juvenile justice system, and Norberto, you see them after, I hate to call it after they've graduated, but with the kind of individuals that you're seeing, we touched on the need to build character. Is there a way, once the person gets in that school to prison pipeline, is there a way of turning that around? Is there a way of educating that person, of building some character as they are struggling to get out of that system?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the main factors of that is using the right approach for the individuals that we are working with. And there are three main components to rehabilitation. And they are the quality of the services provided, the length of time that those people are exposed to those services,
Okay.
and therefore the personal desire to change. When you put those three
Right.
things together,
Okay.
you are going to have basically a winning formula. When I work with the guys that I see every day in the criminal justice system, I really tell them that they are accountable and responsible for turning their lives around, even though the circumstances that led them to that environment or to that decision making may not have been under their control, because they did not choose their parents, and they did not choose to live in that particular environment.
Sure.
They did not choose to be sexually abused,
Yeah.
mentally, physically, emotionally. They did not choose to be in an environment where they lack the things that are most basics and more common to mainstream society. But now that they know that there is some sources out there that they know where they are, now is their responsibility to take the appropriate steps to start shaping that life into the right direction. And it's our responsibility as a society to afford those individuals the access to those systems that are going to help them to change. It is really amazing. I teach groups of 60 individuals at one time in one big section of the jail. And when I ask these individuals how many of them want jobs, all of their hands go up.
Right. Okay.
These are people with mental health issues. These are guys that are criminals. These are guys that are dropped out of school and so on. But they all want to feel useful. They all want to make a contribution. But they are anchored by the behaviors, by the pain, by the anger, by the hatred. All those emotions and the way they process their lives and their life experiences are the things that are holding them back from using and maximizing their potential. Early on, you mentioned something about the values,
Yeah.
okay? And basically, what we like to get the individuals that I work with is to develop a value system that is congruent with society, that meets society's norms and expectations, because most of them, because of the environment and the choices that they make, they have surrounded themselves with individuals that reinforce values and beliefs that are absolutely negative. And our main goal and focus as clinicians is to be able to get these individuals, number one, to identify the faulty beliefs that they have, and then to start reshaping their value system and understand the benefits of having these type of values incorporated into their personal lives. And when you successfully get them to understand that everything that happens in their life is a result of the value system to their beliefs, and by changing those core areas in their life, you're going to change the thought process. Then you're going to be able to change the behaviors, and then you'll be able to change the decisions and then the actions, and therefore they will be able to reap benefits instead of consequences for all the future actions. So that's what is out in front of us right now. Being able to do that and be proactive and be very patient, because not all the people that we work with are going to get well at the same time. For example, I get guys that I work with and they go through 5, 6, 7 different treatment experiences in their lifetime. And some people look at it and say, wow, the last treatment basically experience was the one that made it for him. No, it was the accumulation of all the experiences, the maturity, the people that he encountered along the way, and that set expectations on these people. One of the scariest things that we need to keep in mind as clinicians is this. They did some experiment and they found out that the expectations of the person observing the experiment has an impact on the outcome of the experiment, which means that we as clinicians, we cannot go around putting labels on people and say, he's going to make it, he's not going to make it. Because in reality, we're creating a bad influence. We need to get these guys to understand that there's hope for everyone as long as they adhere to the core values, the core principles, and having enough role models and an environment that support that is the biggest challenge that we are facing right now. Because sometimes it's like working with families in the old days. In the old days in treatment, we get the individual from the family, he goes to the treatment center, the treatment center fix the person and send them back. Where? To the environment that had the same expectations about him in the past. So he go back to the sick environment, and then what happened? He relapsed and came back. So we want to be able to get these individuals geared into a way that they go to an environment that support the continued growth and the continued positive change in their lives, so they can see that they can continue to experience improvement. Sometimes I tell them, look, if you are not going backwards, you're going forward. Okay? And it's like a tree, sometimes you plant it and sometimes it doesn't grow for maybe a couple of weeks. But suddenly you see that start breaking through the ground and going up and experience a lot of growth in less time than the time that you spend as a seed in the bottom of the ground. And most of them are people that are like that.
But many times, I believe we in the health profession or the helping professions, we intervene based on chronological age. We meet a person 40 years old, a person 50, a person 20. We make the assumption that that person is thinking and reasoning as a 20-year or 40-year or 50-year. When indeed we do not understand the emotional age of that 40-year-old or the emotional age of that 50-year-old. And especially when they're in the drug use. They're usually locked into arrested growth and development, and their emotional age is somewhere less than 10 years old, somewhere from birth to 10 years old. So they are being controlled by the emotional age, and we're treating them like an adult. And a child cannot think and function as an adult. They function at the emotional age. And when I taught nursing students, my principle I made with them is that when you are teaching a person about changing health behaviors, because that's based in values, you have to first assess the emotional age of that patient. Because if that person is, and you can do that, I gave them guidelines, find out what their eating habits are. If you have a patient who's eating like a kid or a teenager, that's where their emotional age is. If you have a patient who's eating as an adult, balanced meals with veggies, you can deal with them as an adult. But a person habits around food, a person habits around how to use unstructured time, that begins to give insight into their emotional age.
Absolutely.
I mentioned one thing on that line. Well, with the pipeline, I just want to bring one point there. I've been a general contractor in construction about 40 years as well. That's my trade. That's why, the tool I take to make a living for my family. And as a kid, I had an opportunity. I made that choice, what you say too, about choice, to learn everything I could about construction, because I had to have some tool to make a living, and I knew I needed that to provide for my family. And I try to talk with young people in the prison. I talk with these juveniles you're talking about. I've expressed that to them as well, that you got to have some tool. It's either blue collar training or white collar work. And I would say to you that majority of these young people they learn differently, and a lot of them don't have the academic skills, but they could become good blue collar workers. But I'm going to put that but there. I would say today, that's almost enough. And that was one time the place they could make it. I'm being honest. Right now, and I just finished, I'm still doing a few projects. If you got a record, minor record, nobody wants to hire you on a construction job. One time people say, well, you can't get a job over here or there, but construction, they'll hire you. They ain't doing it no more. I'm making you aware it's becoming worse in the sense that people are concerned about someone being an ex-offender. They're concerned about the liability. What will this individual, if I train them and hire them, they become an electrician or plumber, and then he jumps on someone or hurts someone. The system that we're in, our whole structure is making this noticeable, news media and everything. So people are very afraid now to even employ these young people who got any kind of record, be a small record or whatever. But they say, no, well, you got a record, no, we're not going to touch them. And so on top of, the issues of maybe a minority young person who can't make it, now if you have any record, you out. You can't even do construction work. I just completed a project and I was hiring guys, and one of the things they require now as a general contractor is you have documents on each individual on the site when you're working, and you have to have all the documents. And what they're trying to do is screen out terrorists or illegal aliens. But doing that, now they've created a stronger standard for doing any kind of job. And so this is rough. I mean, and I don't know if everybody, they don't talk about that. And I see with it, well, it's opportunity construction. We say those kind of things. But right now, if these young kids leaving juvenile, if they got any record at all, they almost don't, there's no employment out there.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah.
One that,
Okay.
as I reflect over my life
Right.
and the choices I made,
Yeah.
especially major choices about
Okay.
career and work,
Right.
it was based on emulating
Okay.
adults
Right.
that I respected.
Right.
And and at all ages, even now,
Yeah.
I emulate people
Oh, I understand.
that I see attributes in them that I would like to inculcate,
Yeah.
acquire in my life. For many of our young kids,
Yeah.
especially if they're now juvenile offenders,
Right,
or before they
right.
get there, they have problems finding adults that they can emulate.
Tremendous.
When their neighborhoods, many of our
Yeah.
black kids in
Yeah.
particular, they see drug dealers
Yes.
on the street corners.
Right, right.
They see adult males, middle-aged and older, sitting all day under
Right.
a tree. When I was growing up, everybody was working. The only time black people have had 100% employment was slavery. Since that time, this country has not been committed to black people working.
Yeah.
Ever since slavery, it has been a concerted effort to exclude blacks out of meaningful positions and full employment. So our children do not get to emulate because they don't see black males, especially little boys need to see black men they can emulate. Little girls need to see black women
Rare.
that they can emulate.
That's rare.
Without that, it is very hard to learn new values. You learn by emulating behavior.
Yeah. But it's not there. I mean, what you said, Perez, you're going to speak. I'm going to tell you something. I had a experience in that juvenile that touched me. One of the experiences I had was that you had Hispanics, you had African American, you had Caucasian. And the few that came in there, I love those kids. I come in there talking with them and sharing. Same thing, we talking about employment and getting something. For some reason, the little Hispanic kids would come to me after we get through. And they call me Poppy. That's like father.
Yeah.
Can you help me with this and tell me what I need to do? And a couple of them asked me to give them a copy of my study that I was doing in theology. And I came back and gave it to them. And I'm like, this is rare. I had to love them because it was like they reaching out. And I was trying to understand why even some groups, they understand. And it seemed like they was locked into something. They was afraid, but they understood that they needed help. A lot of the brothers, what I'm saying, African American, those boys was hard. They was like, come to me, old man, what you talking about? And them the same guy, I'm gonna tell you, I left there, it's been over a year now. Some of them same boys been in armed robbery. One of them killed somebody already because they, after they got out of juvenile, they already hard criminals, already going down the road. And I remember the faces of some of the brothers that went with me. They called me and said, remember so-and-so? Man, he just got caught on robbery, So, I don't know, in our system we're talking about it, but there's very little that we're doing. I mean, it's just like we're exposing all these cases at 11 o'clock news. We're talking about that. But are we really trying to help some young people see what's happening and what we need to do. I don't see it.
The question I would ask is
Yeah.
this. How do you learn to trust another human being? How do you learn to trust the process? If you do not trust another person, if you do not trust the process, there's no relationship. And for most of the children that start using drugs early and or end up in juvenile justice, they don't trust anyone or anything.
Yeah, I know.
So you're not going to be able to build relationships with those kids until you teach them to trust. If you follow Erickson's 8 stages of development, trust is the first thing a child has developed from birth, that 1 year with the parent. And if the adults have failed them, and most of them have been failed,
That's it.
they distrust adults, they distrust life.
That's
And nobody addressed that issue. And even healthy
No, I understand.
adults,
Yeah.
the relationships, husband, wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, they're dysfunctional if anybody in that relationship is not trusting. If both of you are not trusting each other, you don't have a relationship.
Amen. That's right.
So our children, we have to
They emulate it.
build,
Yeah.
right, we have
Yeah, I
to
got you.
do things with them to build a relationship that yielding trust,
Yeah.
teaching them to trust us.
Amen.
And then we give back to them the trust they have earned from us.
Absolutely, and one of the biggest challenges that we face is just a simple fact that with the economic downturn, we have been cutting back on essential services.
Yeah.
Our teachers have been fired from school,
Yeah.
basically, and if you can not have enough children in school,
Yeah.
how can you pay for education in the jails? You see? So what happens now is the services in the criminal justice system in general have been curtailed in a way
Wow.
that the little hope and direction that they could get in the place is basically very minimal and deficient. One of the studies that I was talking to my supervisor today
Okay.
before coming here is the fact that in the statistics
Okay.
regarding amount of inmates exposed to get their GED, 60% of them have been successful at staying away from jail
Yes,
After receiving
yes,
the GED.
yeah.
after receiving
And
the
I can
GED.
concur that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the reason is very simple, because people don't understand the value that education has on helping the person to develop.
Yeah.
When a person goes to school, he's not learning English, math, language, and science. He's learning about setting goals. He's learning about learning and growing and improving their self-esteem.
Yeah.
And
Bro-
delaying gratification.
Exactly, because they
It's
want to
important.
get that grade. They learn the importance of time management, and they learn the importance when they work in group about teamwork. They learn the benefits of being selfless, and at that point is when they start finding out who they are. So there's many ways to help people to change their lives. In some cases they need substance abuse treatment. In other cases they need to improve their education. In other cases they need to get back with the core values through spirituality, religion, church, whatsoever. Because one of the interesting factors of that is that for these guys, the church is the only family that they know. Because like you were saying before, their parents were letting them down.
Yeah.
And at one point, when they reach that point when they get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they get themselves, they feel in despair, but they got somebody that give them direction, somebody that at least that they trust and they respect. Then that becomes for them like the rock that is going to get them to find the purpose that they need on their personal development. I tell you, after all these years I work with young people from 14 up. I work in maximum security. I work with the ladies in jail.
Yeah.
I work with the adults, maximum security, everywhere.
Okay.
I tell you, I have seen these guys show amazing acts of kindness.
Okay.
Even in my daily work right now, this is kind of hard to realize.
Okay.
But in the group that I'm working right now, on Fridays when they get their food that they buy, the guys that have, they donate, and they put like a lottery for the guys that don't have. These are criminals. These are inmates. These are people that are outcasts of society, showing act of kindness for the people that are with them there. You see, and it's amazing how you see that there is hope for them. We have a moral responsibility of at least allocating some type of resources,
Yeah.
at least for the people that want to get better.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of people in our institutions that they really want to get better.
Yeah.
That they're really they are good individuals. And actually, let me tell you one thing: there is goodness inside every one of them. Sometimes our failure as clinicians is to be able to reach out and find that goodness that is within them.
Yeah.
Because I seen individuals that after 20 years, I meet them again, and they say, you know, I really appreciate what you told me 20 years ago.
They remember.
And I don't even remember their faces, but they come and say that. And sometimes when I talk, some of them that I find them in the stores, I find them in the mechanic shops, I find them everywhere. And these guys were in jail many years ago, and they are now productive members of society. Picking back on what you said about the construction workers, people need to understand that when these guys get an education, they put all that bad behavior behind, because they become a different person, and it's up to society to give them a second chance,
If that's
because
the-
everybody deserves a second chance.
See, and that's true.
I agree.
But that's the problem, though, because I listen. If you listen at the news media and listen to what's being spoken out there, it's not the same thing what you're saying. Because, you know, I was in the process of trying to do apprenticeship and job training with young people in the system, because I was working with substance abuse programs as well, and these were, sad to say, those who say that they were Christians in the church. And I said, if we train young people, give them an opportunity, you know, and train them as journeymen, you know, could we use them on your house? No. I don't want to see a jailbird or nobody at my house like that. I don't care what they learn. But then they'll be smiling and say, yeah, well, we're trying to rehabilitate them. So, see, it's like you're saying one thing, but then the news media and what we said at 11 o'clock is verifying, you know, anytime an ex-offender, somebody done did something, it's like, you know, should we let them out of jail? You know, they got out of jail too early, should have never been out. So when you hear those kind of words, how much hope are we really giving to that ex-offender who is learning, who getting education, who's trying again, when you get that kind of comment from society?
But
I'm just saying, you
yeah,
know.
but the fundamental aspect here, and that's why Dr. Robertson,
No, go
is fear.
I know.
And the fear comes
I know.
from the lack of knowledge and understanding of the individual.
I agree.
Because I actually,
Yeah.
I took a gentleman that does training
Yeah.
for professionals. I'm talking about this guy works with high-end people doing seminars, etc. And I, by luck and you know, help from God, I convinced, I got somehow to get this guy in the jail to teach the inmates about the principles of building their own business. And he came and taught them about one complete class of all the basics about putting together their own business. And a week later, I gave them time and resources to create their own businesses and to do a presentation to this professional about the businesses that they wanted to put together in the community. And we had like 5 groups of 12 people each. And these guys created everything from all the graphics, to the plans, to the positions, and so on. And the guy was blown away. He said to me after he finished to seeing the presentations and giving them feedback and direction, he said, if I have not known that I was in a jail, I would have thought that these were average individuals, professionals, putting presentation for a CEO of a corporation. And these are your basic criminals from the street.
Some of the most brilliant minds
Yeah,
in
the
America
minds
are
are.
in prison.
Yeah, so
Well,
that's another thing that
the
you know,
two
yeah.
biggest places
Okay.
where the greatest waste of potential are in this country are the jails and the graveyards.
I agree.
Because ideas, opportunities,
Yes.
new inventions
Yes.
were never taken to the full
Advantage.
development
Okay.
at the end, because it got stagnated by those events that held those people back.
Okay.
I tell you, our panel is giving so much knowledge and information. I just love it, because I can sit back and listen to all of this. I want to share very, very briefly a story about someone that I work with, and this happened. This is one story, but this happened to me many times. I may or may not have told you all I worked in substance abuse for over some 20 some odd years, and I was worked in the Bronx Psychiatric Center, and there was one of the first public state-operated programs there. And we get the guys who had been through just about every program before they hit our doorstep. And in one case, we had this gentleman I'll call Sonny, and Sonny had done 20 some odd years in jail for murder. And through a legal, what do you call it, loophole, he was able to get out much earlier than he was supposed to. Well, part of the agreement, when this came out, was that he would go through a rehabilitation problem because he had a very serious alcohol and substance abuse problem. Coming onto the unit, as we called it, half the staff was scared to death. Okay, but we had a very unique set of individuals. Many who were from the community, several who were recovering themselves, and also individuals who looked like the people who we were treating. And I have to say that we had one young lady who was from Savannah, Georgia, and she literally took Sonny under her wing and loved him, and I say that, loved him into recovery, because he would come in with his prison walk and prison look, etc. Folks would start backing up, and this lady, her name was Gladys, and Gladys would say, honey, listen, you don't need to look like that. Just come, sit beside me, and talk to Gladys, okay? And Sonny at first would just sit, etc. But to make a long story short, this same gentleman with 20 some odd years, who had done some terrible things in his life, left the program successfully, did not have a high school diploma when he left, got into a program that paid something like 80 some odd cents. It was a sheltered workshop. Also took advantage, got his high school diploma, went on, enrolled into a college course in New York, got his bachelor's degree, and the last I was in contact with Sonny, he had become the head counselor at a state-operated alcohol and rehab program on Staten Island. Okay, and also better than that, came back to reunion and told me about he and his wife traveling to Egypt and looking at the pyramids, etc. And I said to him, I said, Sonny, something's wrong here. I haven't been able to get to Egypt, to look at the pyramids yet. But it gave me such a sense of satisfaction to know that this individual had blossomed. Now, many people would say, okay, that's the exception. One of the things that I have to say, and Alberta, I'll have to ask for your endorsement here, that that is not an exception. There are many individuals who, given what you mentioned, the hope and also a sense of purpose, and also what Ms. Garman mentioned, that love can do, again, with God's help, anything.
Amen.
And the thing that I believe makes the difference is that sense of expectation, what we expect that individual to be able to do. And with that, I have seen literally miracles happen, both in the rehabilitation program, and I used to go out to Rikers Island and visit out there, and seen some miracles also happen there. So it says to me that somehow we need to jigger our efforts, and instead of aiming at locking them up and throwing away the key, to really think about, restoring, regaining, restoring, and truly do what we say we're supposed to be doing, rehabilitating those individuals. But again, that is a whole sea change. And Johnny, you're right. It's a sea change from a lot of what's happening. What I like to do, I like to tap on Vernon's lawyer's knowledge here, okay? And Vernon, not to put you on the spot, there's been a lot talked about as far as such things as the mandatory sentencing laws, as far as the type of sentencing based on the type of drug, or the differentiation between crack cocaine and powdered cocaine. Is law, or that larger, if you want to call it, social and political system that has really made prisons and jails into a business, is that something that it is worthwhile for us to spend energy in terms of trying to rehabilitate that or to change that system? Is it worthwhile?
Well, I believe that everyone who believes in doing justly, they should oppose the mandatory sentencing. And that is a political consequence of very conservative, right-wing minded people making the choice to criminalize minorities in this country, because powder cocaine is no different than crack cocaine, but they chose to give harsher sentences to the drugs that are used by minorities, and give a wink and a pass to powder cocaine and drugs that are used mainly by whites. Because there's definitely a racial difference in drug choices because, again, of income and what's least expensive, what's most expensive. So mandatory jail sentences, that's not a function of the law or lawyers. Because lawyers believe very much that judges should have the discretion to weigh in factors of whether or not this person is going to be a risk in the future, or whether what this person did puts society at risk. If you have done a crime that didn't include a victim, then you should not be given these long jail sentences, because you're not a risk to society. We need you working. We need you supporting yourself. When you put people in prison and incarcerate them for 10, 20 years, you're taking that person out of the workforce, and you're depriving the country of income taxes. I have paid income taxes. I want everybody paying income taxes. So we should definitely, as a nation, oppose mandatory sentencing and the inherent unfairness of taking away from judges the discretion to weigh individual factors when they sentence a person.
Okay, well said, and I think that puts a period and an exclamation point on that point. Okay. Since we've just got a minute left, what I'd like to do is to turn a bit to my left to my friend Johnny Robinson and ask from a point of view, because you talked about from a spiritual and biblical point of view what we are struggling with in terms of this whole prison to school to prison pipeline, etc. And I'd like to ask you to just put a word to us.
Okay, I'm gonna do one, and we have a minute to do that, but it's Romans 13:1 and 2, and Paul spoke to this particular thing. It opened my eyes, and it spoke to this particular point as far as authority. It says, everyone must submit himself to the governing authority, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Subsequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. And he spoke that 2,000 years ago in his letter to Rome.
Well, with that note, we're going to have to hold another version of our journey. We're going to have to put it to bed, so to speak. And to our audience, thank you for listening to us again. I want to thank this distinguished panel. I truly mean distinguished panel, because there are many things that were said tonight, that were shared tonight, that I certainly did not know. I hope that our audience has heard you loud and clear. And again, know that in the future, we'll be calling on you to share some more of that knowledge and information. So with that, to our audience, good night. And as we say here at the journey is from me to you and from you to me. Good night.